Yes, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of Full Course Yellow. This is our in-pit lane after party. If you're joining us fresh from Channel 31 Melbourne, you're more than welcome. We're very happy to see you here. A bit of a wallow back, a bit of a nostalgia night tonight on Channel 31, going back to the 2015 Phillip Island Historic Classic. So, so that was on. That was on tonight. So, I hope you enjoyed that if you were watching. If you're joining us here on Full Course Yellow, we've got, not all of the regular team here. We've got Chris is missing tonight and Dave Scoville not with us, but we've got Peter Johnson, Craig Doc Latigo, we've got Stuart Fairweather and also Richard Outram joining us as well. We sort of got carried away before, so we were just having a quiet chat to ourselves about all sorts of things, including as you will see in just a moment on Doc's lower third. As you can see, yes, I was unaware of the news that John Elliott had passed away. So there you go. And judging by the look on Richard's face, he didn't know either. So there you go. So anyway, that's So to the family and friends of John Elliott, goodbye, John Elliott. Okay.
We were getting nostalgia. We're talking about live TV, actually. In fact, we were talking about John's efforts on Channel 31 that led to some of the efforts of Graham Kennedy. And I was about to start on Tonight Live with my Richard Stubbs renditions, which were brilliant on Friday night.
About Richard Stubbs, can you do the crow call? We're after
No, we don't know. Nobody can do the crow call. Thank you.
I won't even do Claude the Crow on Shell's Neighbourhood either. So we'll leave that one alone.
Well done, Doc. Yeah. I didn't know you knew that one.
Yeah, so Norm
the Kangaroo was a great cuddle.
I remember.
You got into the pouch,
I remember the crow call really, really well. I was watching that night, and it was during an advertisement for, I think it was Seidel Hair Products, Rosemary Margan, and Rosemary was advertising doing the live read, and Graham was trying to break her up with get her to crack up with various bird impressions, and it wasn't working. She was the total professional, Rosemary. She was ploughing through unregarded.
Well,
then he brought out the big guns. It's like, have you heard the crow impression?
Richard and Stuart can attest when we go out and do live coverage as well too. Brett, you and myself, Brett, we get tackled plenty of times and tried to get put up our game, and don't we? We have to stand straight, and look down the barrel, and we somehow pull it off.
Like this, straight down the barrel.
Yeah, I mean, people in the background, sometimes when we do interviews, don't we, Brett? We'll have about 20, 30 people in the background like that, pulling faces, poking fun at us, doing all stupid sort of stuff.
We've got a huge fan following.
You've just got to tune out, unfortunately.
That's
So, Richard, that fan following, is that from Dyson or Electrolux?
Fans, air conditioners, radiators, heaters.
And what Doc and Brett probably don't know is the reason people pull funny faces is because those of us behind the cameras turn around and give the death stare to anybody who's trying to get in the frame.
Oh, love your work, Stuart. Love it. That's the look of okay. The Grim Reaper's got us down the back in front of
Yes. Anyway, let's say hello.
Evening, BBB.
Yes, Box joining us again. Another looking forward to another session of motorsport therapy in the lockdown and earthquake state. Hope all are well. We will get onto the earthquake again a little bit later. That's before we go.
Yeah, there was an earthquake.
Apparently, yes.
I slept straight through it.
Yeah, I imagine you did. Yes.
I barely blinked. I looked up. I went, okay, things are falling off shelves, and I just kept on working while it happened. I went, how long is this just going to last? And just kept working.
You're a brave man.
It is not like us humans can change it. We just got to endure it.
Yep. So I just kept working away, and everyone's going, oh, I went, just get back to work.
Yep. Russell Clark saying hello. Yes, so we're saying evening all. Looking forward to the lockdown lowdown tonight. Yes, we'll have that. Also from Russell Clark also saying that enjoyed the historics from the island. Incidentally, the stuff that we had on tonight on Channel 31 from Phillip Island Historics is available on the YouTube channel. I didn't put up a set because it has been on the YouTube channel basically since 2015. I only found out sort of when I was looking around for something I won't go through the whole story. I was looking around for something fill in on a couple of segments tonight, and found the 2015, found the original footage from that and the original shows, and then found out on the YouTube page that it's actually listed under In Pit Lane, the missing episode, because we put it out in 2015, and for reasons I've totally forgotten about, it never went to air. The original was never seen on Channel 31. So tonight was actually after like 6 years, it was it was its premiere tonight. But you can, if you look for In Pit Lane, the missing episode, you can actually see that footage tonight with a lot of the cars that were there.
Your life will be fulfilled now. The missing link.
Brett,
I've worked on films that have taken less time to get out.
I can't remember.
How are you, Mad Cow?
Yeah, Mad Cow Market are joining us as well. So some of the regulars here. Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about we've talked about earthquakes and the passing of John Elliott and all the rest of it. So let's talk about some motorsport that's coming up. With Formula One coming back on the weekend, which is good. It gives us something to talk about.
Have they hired any professional drivers for it this time?
Well,
this is 2 weeks in a row. You talked about qualifying last week and got a few people off on the edge of their seats. Now you're flying off the bat already, like a foul ball at softball, just flicking one off into the crowd. Any professionals out there?
Well, speaking of professionals or lack of professionals, Haas have announced the re-signing of both Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin. Nikita Mazepin's money, so that's going to continue. And once again,
the other re-signings today as well too.
We still don't have the only seat that's available now at this stage should be the second Alfa Romeo seat.
Sebastian Vettel and his counterpart were signed as well too. It was
that was never in doubt. That was
announced today. Yep. Anyway, as well.
So at the moment the only seat that's free, that looks free at the moment, is the one alongside Bottas now at Alfa Romeo.
Any suggestions, Stuart? Stuart wants to sign a professional driver.
Actually, I was reading what's down the bottom, and I thought I saw something that said 30 cars on a Formula. It's been a long time since we've had a grid that big on Formula One.
Yeah, we might get that. That's something from.
They'll need to bring the cost of the cars down.
Well, what Toto Wolff move on to it now. What Toto Wolff is suggesting is he suggested this for a long time. He's been saying that he believes that there's no massive difference in cost between each of the teams. Instead of bringing in new teams into Formula One, to keep the existing teams, but have a third car to turn up, and have some sort of limitations on the drivers of that car to bring through younger drivers, people like Oscar Piastri and Theo Pourchaire and all of those sort of people who are basically hit the logjam at the moment. So he was sort of saying, well, we should have like a third car that every, you could have the existing 10 teams, but they'd have 3 cars each rather than 2. I don't think it'll get up, but I mean, it's an interesting.
That would mean having to split qualifying into 2 distinct groups.
Which would not be a bad
basically
thing.
Say an A driver from each team in one group and the B driver from each team in another group. But there'll still be log jams and there'll still be idiots
and there'll be teething problems and there'll be whingers and there'll be carry-on. It'll be carry-on movies will be coming out in spades.
It'll be just like Excels with the Masters and Trophy class.
yes, very much so. Very much we have a
the young guys class. And the old farts.
And the old farts. So you could have Fernando. We lost Kimmy, but you know.
I've heard about those XLs. You can get some decent upgrades on those. You can make it some go fast parts, and you can still be old and drive them as quick.
Can you get go fast parts? Oh,
that's what I saw. I saw a listing in XL. I think they wanted $30,000 for it this week.
Yeah, they make them at SpaceX. They put the car in the front and they launch it.
There you go. It doesn't even end up in the ocean when they parachute it out. So
and they have a rubbery driver. Yeah.
You could have a sub, or hello, I'm a crash test dummy.
But so that was an interesting plan by to go for the possibility of three drivers. As I said, I doubt whether it will get up. Yes, Paul.
It doesn't hurt to have it. Oh, just before we go to what Mac has said, it doesn't hurt to have a discussion from all these team owners and directors and companies and all that, because we have seen in motorsport across the world at many levels that it goes stale after a couple of years, and there's always going to be critics, knockers, and doubters, and etc. like that. They don't like the sound of the cars, they don't go fast enough, or this circuit or whatever like that. So I embrace, sometimes it's controversial, the comments that these guys make, especially if they're team owners or team directors. Obviously we saw some great Zach Brown footage with Daniel Ricciardo, in the last Grand Prix when he won at that, and it even made the news over here to a certain extent on mainstream. So especially some great Daniel follow-up shots from him going and putting the trophy next to Ayrton Senna back at McLaren headquarters. So look, all these discussions are great as long as they just all remember that respect everyone else's opinion. It doesn't have to be. Have a look at I think Jackie Stewart even stuck his nose in as usual, like he does every second or every third day, and about the Verstappen and Lulu, which is
Jackie Stewart is becoming the Niki Lauda of a new generation. It's like
I think he's got some pre-written. He's got some pre-written quotes for it to go every day. It doesn't even have to bat anyone.
Pretty much so.
Insert name here, and then just it's controversial.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's like I don't know how we're going to finish this article. I know. Let's ring Jackie and see if we can get a quote.
Throwaway comment, and let's just take it completely out of context as well too. Just for giggles. Anyway,
we've also seen in Formula One coming up that the Monaco is sort of joining the modern era, and it's going to be from it has already been a sort of a 3-day meeting, but it was always traditionally the Thursday they'd have practice, and then they'd have a day off on Friday, and then so now they're going to change that, and as of next year, it's going to be like pretty much all the other Grands Prix, and they're going to bring it in, and it'll be just Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the Monaco Grand Prix.
So they can't have a day off on the yachts and have a bender on a Thursday, then have a rest day and just drink milk and cookies on the Friday, and then go for a 2-day bender and form. So they've just got to party straight for 3 days on those yachts now. That's going to be good value. It's going to be really good value to watch. Just don't worry about putting on the cars, except for just cross to a shot every now and again when they're going around there following each other and can't pass, and just go straight away to the parties over on the yacht over there and get some really good.
Somebody called Dave
Supercars and Supermodels
Stillwell has saying he'd really like to get a younger race car driver's opinion. Maybe somebody who's been on the show before. I wonder who that could be. Yes, if you jump in front of a camera, Dave, and join us.
No, hang on, a younger driver. So that would be Dan Rick. He's been on the show before.
When he was very young, that was at Macau. That was
what's Dan now?
Way back.
33, 35?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And if we can, just for a second, go back to Paul's question, what's Richard's excuse? The answer is probably the air conditioner belt. I will remind Richard of taking a second off his lap time by removing it from an Alpha around Kolkata.
I've found a really good way to make the car go quicker. Remove the driver and put somebody else in it.
Air conditioning was more important at that stage. You didn't, like the window was stuck up. No winder or anything. Yeah.
Well, you want the window up for aerodynamic purposes. Yeah. So that's it, to maximize.
That's also the excuse with like the shape of helmets. Because if you compare this aerodynamics to Doc's, obviously I'm going to go through the air cleaner.
Absolutely. Did you take the baby seat out too, Richard?
There's no way to talk about how short my friend was. My co-driver.
Oh, yeah. As long as anyway. Yeah. We'll leave it at that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
that's an aside. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. Paul's Well, there you go. Paul's been quick on the Google. Age 32 years. So born 1st of July, 1989 in Perth. So yeah.
Well, we catch up with some young racing drivers here. We've been down to the Oakley karting club down there a couple of years ago when they were doing meetings. We even commentated a few races.
And speaking of which, congratulations to young Cooper Murray, young Porsche racer who has been selected as Australia's representative in the Porsche Young Drivers Shootout later in the year. He's also going over. He's going to have a race in the Carrera Cup in France not in France actually, but in Portimao, and then afterwards he's going to get the test drive of the brand new Porsche over there, the new GT3 car on the days afterwards. And Cooper will be our guest on next week's edition of In Pit Lane. All know the plans scheduled to have a chat with him on Monday. So so we'll be catching up with Cooper Murray next week on the program. So be watching.
Good luck to Cooper. The good start on establishing himself over in Europe and doing some factory drives and getting hopefully some.
I mean, it certainly worked well for Matty Campbell, who's obviously been.
Yeah, I've been privileged enough to catch up with Matty at the Bend there, and 2 meetings in the last couple of years and have a chat. Remember, we had a chat with him, and Matt's a really nice guy, and still remembers his ground roots over here in Australia, and it's good to see him. And hopefully, he can come out and we have a Bathurst 12-hour that's truly international again in the next 12 months.
Yeah, I think that might be asking a bit much, unfortunately. I think, in terms of, you never know. I mean, we might get back to some sort of semblance of
mid next year. We can be rescheduled for something like that.
But anyway, with Formula One, Pete, any Formula One news at your end for coming up with Scotchy or Sochi on the weekend? How's it pronounced? Scotchy or Scotchy? I think it's Sochi, isn't it? Sochi, yeah.
Don't you remember the Winter Olympics?
Yeah, it's the last race they're going to have there, isn't it? They're going to race the next Russian Grand Prix is going to take place at a brand new circuit somewhere. Where's that?
St. Petersburg.
It is at St. Petersburg. Yeah, well, that'll be interesting. So Sochi didn't last all that long. So it wasn't. I don't think it was the worst track. I mean, I know that it was very much criticised to begin with, but I think with what they had to work with and what they did with it, I think it worked out to be quite a good track.
Yeah, I think it was interesting.
It seems to provide. Well, of course, last year I think Valtteri Bottas actually won the race, so he'll obviously be very keen to keep there because I mean, there's nothing stopping him now. It's like Valtteri, Lewis is faster than you. Okay, well let Lewis work his way past me.
Who's going to hit who first this week? It'll be good. What's Naka said?
Yes. Yes, we had going. Yes, there he is. John, past 79, was he? I didn't think he was quite that. I didn't think he was quite that old.
79. I saw it. That's why I've got my.
Wow.
He could have. Yes, I think you might be right there. Nakas. He was he was a Foster's man at the time, and he is at Carlton United Breweries, which is right around the corner there in Abbotsford from obviously Carlton anyway. And thank you to the professor above me who has put up I'm guessing, because it's actually written in Russian, the parameters and the bits and pieces of it. But that'd be Sochi, I would say.
Sochi. Yeah, that's Sochi.
That's quite a, how many terms is it? 12, 13, 14, 16 terms. So, it gets challenging as long as it's got some passing errors, Now there's a little bit of the two main straights there as well on 1 and 9. So it had, some good vantage points there. So, but I think what Sochi's got against it, and it's probably affected Formula One as well as every other sport, after the Winter Olympics, and that's why I brought it up for when we were describing it at the start, why it may be gone, is a lot of Sochi is losing its glamour. It's losing all its sporting events and losing all its I suppose infrastructure there. So after Sochi, the government just basically didn't fund anything, and the place has fallen apart. So you can actually Google it on Google Earth and stuff like that, and because obviously the Russians don't like you prying too much into something that's falling apart and doesn't need an earthquake for it to happen. So Yeah.
Well, that's what happened here with Homebush and the supercars race in Sydney.
No one was keen to go. I don't know what the thing is. I don't know enough about the sort of the topography of that part of Sydney, but I just know talking to anybody up in Sydney about there, people hated going out there. It didn't matter whether it was for supercars or for the AFL or for whatever it was out there, the NRL even. They just did not like going out there. I mean, it wasn't that far out of Sydney, but if you talk to anybody up there, they absolutely hated the.
While we're on it then, congratulations to Scott Pye. He's re-signed for a couple more years at Team 18 there in Supercars.
Yes, and that, of course, that takes another one out of the because there were rumours that he might be making a move as well. So that's another seat confirmed in Supercars. Latest rumours for the Supercars is that they might, in order to fulfil the contracts for both the television and the New South Wales state government, the rumour is going around that they might actually end up doing 4 races at Sydney Motorsport Park. The original plan was to do a couple of races up in Queensland, then move down to Sydney and do perhaps 1 or 2 races at Sydney Motorsport Park, and then move over to Bathurst for the final round. It looks like now that because of this is the crazy thing. They're going to New South Wales to have all of these races in New South Wales when it's got the highest rates of COVID in Australia.
Oh, goddamn bin chicken! Why can't Palaszczuk step in anyway?
But I think that it's obviously very important for their contract with both, particularly with Foxtel, but also to an extent with Channel 7, that they get Bathurst run, and also they get a minimum number of rounds in a number of races. So there's talk that there may even be sort of some midweek races, that we might get sort of a couple of night races, say on a Wednesday, and then have a couple of day races over the weekend, and then they'll go back and finish. So everyone will just move to a hub in Sydney. They'll stay there. They'll race in New South Wales. Then they'll finish off at Bathurst, and then hope that they can get home for Christmas. I suppose
was that a COVID hub where they all acquire it and then go home and take it back to wherever they come from?
Take it back to wherever they
hail from. Yeah. Anyway,
as Paul is pointing out, of course, and as he was want to say regularly, that John Elliott, in fact, never. Well, he said that he never.
That
ever
is correct.
That
is 100% correct. Yeah.
And
but he did follow it up when he started saying it after. So he took. I forget
the name. I forget the name of the show that he did on Channel 31. We were talking just before everybody came on. His show on Channel 31 was a Monday night late night talk show.
Was it a real show?
I don't think it was. I think it was more of a general show. I sort of forget the details of it now, but I know that it caused a lot of controversy because I was actually rung up by somebody. I think it was from somebody from Channel 9 who rang me and said, what have you got to say about, John Elliott on Channel 31? I said, well, I've got no idea. I said, I don't work nobody works for Channel 31, and I didn't see the show, so I got no idea what he said. But apparently, he said something pretty offensive, and he got the show was removed from the 31 schedules.
Surprise! I'll tell you what, though, that reminds me. I don't know if anyone has any sort of links to it these days. How green was my cactus? That was.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was a radio show, wasn't it?
That was a radio show, but it was a great couple of minutes you could listen to it every week. It was like it was the old version of a podcast.
On 3XY.
Yes, the old. Well, there exactly.
Also,
3XY.
And then
my favourite at the time was Mike Carlton's Friday News Review. That was a classic. I wish that was still on around. And
anyway, getting back to the supercars, I did see a great quote unquote grab from Mr. Lounsey himself during the week. I don't remember the first part of it, but the second one was basically, I think the words were, go out there and try and break it. So that's really good news. If they've given him the Gen 3 car and they've kitted it up, and obviously I can't remember one of the two engines in it, and they've timed to go out there, go hard, go fast, or go out there, do something, go fast, and try and break it. And so he thought, oh, this is gonna be great. So Lowndesy, he's probably one of the fastest conservative drivers out there that can keep the thing ticking over. A bit like, obviously, he learnt from Peter Brock and emulated him, and obviously, it was growing up as a fan of him. So he was like Brock. He could go out there and he could put a car down the track there in 2 minutes and 12 seconds, lap after lap after lap after lap, if the car was safe enough and reliable and straight enough and powerful enough to do it. So they've given it in his hands to go out there and do some test driving for it. And he was, I think we mentioned it a few weeks ago, he'd done some initial tests, and it might have been at Winton, and that was just a couple of laps here and there. We heard the sound of the engine just do it. But now they've time to go and break it.
Yeah, they've been doing a lot of testing up at Queensland, at I think both Queensland Raceway and also out at Paul Morris's complex.
The dude.
There, so I think that they've been doing some testing there. They've been running. Interesting, they've been running it in some TA2 cars in the chassis there. So they've been sort of modifying some of the running gear to run with that. So that's been interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. As I say, they're not going to run. They're not going to run to the 5-litre formula anymore. They're going to. They'll have different. They'll have different specifications, different sizes for the Ford and different sizes for the Chev.
They'll be crate engines, yep.
This is the problem. They won't actually be crate engines. They're still going to be mostly developed in Australia, and that's one of the arguments that they're using at the moment, is the fact that the cars are not going to be as cheap as they possibly could be. I think that was always the argument. A lot of people have been saying, well, why don't they run? I think it was Peter Adderton's argument, is why don't we just run sort of like basically NASCAR crate engines, perhaps the Xfinity engines or something like that. There's a Ford, there's a Chev, and if anybody wants to run one, we've got a Toyota there as well. The other interesting thing in terms of G3, and this might get a rise out of Stuart's eyebrows, is the fact that is somebody that a company called Dodge is being rumoured to
Hellcrate.
Yeah, is being there
707 horsepower. Just drop it in.
Yeah, so they're being so they're sort of certainly talking about. There's been a few people have popped up there, making. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening via. If you're listening
a younger race driver,
yes, we can. A younger race driver has now appeared. Please don't panic. Please remain calm because Dave Stillwell has joined us on the program. G'day, Dave. How are you? It looks like your hair hasn't recovered from the.
I was going to say, I think I've got some competition in the messy hair look. I think.
Yeah, I've been researching ways of culturally appropriate hairdos for a white male equivalent of an afro, but I'm getting there.
Here we go, Dave. I've got something for you.
But yes,
I've got a hedge you could walk through.
Well, the question, of course, Stuart, is
what on earth I can use it to clean my toilet.
Yeah, what on earth are you doing with a hairbrush there?
And what's this? Speaking of brush, is that to brush his the whiskers that he's grown since we saw him last as well too?
He's looking. He's
lost
in lockdown mode.
Lost the razor, or it's gone blunt, or something along those lines.
Incidentally, for those of you who are watching live on YouTube at the moment. Naggers has found himself the Channel 30, the Channel 31, the article. John Elliott on it was the Big Jack and Cooter show. So it was Anthony Koutafidis was obviously the co-host of that, and it's that's the story. Yeah, John. Yeah, C31 distances itself from John Elliott comments. So we thank you for that link. I will go and after this is finished, we shall go and look at. We should go and look at that because that'll bring back some memories.
You see, this show is interactive.
It is. It's very interactive, and if you'd like to interact with it, you can join us live every Thursday night at 9:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. That's 11:30 a.m. in the UTC. if you're watching from anywhere else in the world, it's probably the best way of finding it. Or, of course, you can listen to it on demand on the podcast on Spotify and Google Podcasts. But the way to get involved is just, come on board and have your 2 bobs worth.
And if we're going to do CSA's community service announcements, don't forget to change your clocks next week then.
It's supposed to be on Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time.
Yeah.
I had to pick mine up off the floor
already.
Your clock.
Yes, my clock.
Oh,
our Queensland audience will have to tune in an hour earlier.
Yes. If you're watching this, for
everybody else, there's a mobile phone that does it automatically.
Yeah, and of course the usual stuff will come up, like the cows won't be happy.
The cows won't be happy. Those of us who do anything involving
we'll have to get out of bed earlier.
Yeah. Also, I imagine if Stuart keeps doing office hours, it means that's not going to start until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning again, isn't it? So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's going to be a late. It's going to be an even later night for you. But anyway,
any more supercar stuff?
Let's talk about more things. Well, Dave, just quickly, any Formula One news that you want to talk about?
It was interesting to read Oscar Piastri's comments on Speed Cafe recently, where he's basically made the point that Formula One has only a very small number of seats available year on year. At the moment, they're all sewn up with either the incumbents or the incoming people who are far more financed than he is. But I know that obviously Mark Webber and the team behind him, including his PR rep from Melbourne, Gerald McDornan, will be doing everything they can to secure a seat for him. But at the moment, when Renault only powers 2 cars in the field, gives them precious little leverage to sneak him into a junior team. So
you'd have to wonder what they're going to do, what Alpine are going to do with him, because as you say, they don't have anywhere that they can put him in at the moment. It seems to have gone a bit quiet on the whole hypercar front. So what do they do with him, especially if he does end up winning this championship? Because
test driver.
Yeah, that's about as far as they can go with him in terms. But you would think because of his age and all the rest of it, that they'd want him out there and actually racing something. Could you see any chance at all that they might sort of try and farm him out to IndyCar racing or something, just to keep his hand in for a year or so until they wait for Fernando to step aside?
The only thing I can consider is possibly some other part of the Nissan-Renault alliance. Would be potentially maybe a Nissan or a Nismo drive in Super GT, something Infinity related even, a Nissan GT drive in a GT3 car somewhere. But unfortunately for Renault, they're in engagement at a very high level. You kind of go from the Renault powered junior formula to Formula One, and then with only a single, ex-Rebellion. The Orica built R14 that's now branded as the Alpine. There's precious little places for them to farm drivers out to. But that being said, Alex Albon's spent a season out in the weeds in DTM, and he's coming back in essentially as a Red Bull funded driver at Williams next year. So there are opportunities, for the driver programs for you to go and take a sabbatical year and out of, elite level open wheeler driving and do something else.
The thing is, the other
anything Red Bull could be on the cards, because obviously Red Bull have got far-reaching resources as well, not just as well.
But they've got their own drive. They've got their own drivers. They've got their own problem in fitting in people like Liam Lawson and those. So and Nick Cassidy sort of dropped off of the radar. He was being talked about at one stage as being very much a potential Formula One driver. I think that's probably that bus has probably left the stop right now. But Liam Lawson is still, and is still in contention for this year's DTM. Has done really well in his first year. He's only 19 years old. The kid's got a lot of talent, and Red Bull would like to keep him in the fold. So it would certainly help if they've got somewhere that they could put him. As you say, Alpine have got the. The other problem is that their other driver in Formula 2 is the man who's chasing down Oscar Piastri in the title, and that's Zhao, the Chinese driver, who is in second place. He's clearly a very good steerer, but he's also is also coming equipped with large amounts of money, and probably they don't have to worry too much about getting him into a Formula One seat because there's so much Chinese money there. He's increasingly being talked about as the man to move into the Alfa Romeo seat with all that Chinese money. The deal at the moment, the thing that's stopping it, is he wants a 2-year deal, and at the moment they're apparently only prepared to give him a 1-year deal. So, and I can see it from his point of view.
I want to see how many times he crashes in one season before giving him a car for a second.
Exactly. Even if as you're saying, Stuart, the car's paid for when it breaks. However, we want to see how good you are at talent at the top level because
you put it back together.
There's going to be a revolving.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll put it back. They've only got a week to put it back together sometimes, but with the revolving door, you go in it for one season, you don't make the cut, or you don't get along with the engineers, or blah 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 blah. You're immature. They'll shove you out the door and then give someone else a crack. Because as we were saying right back at the start, limited positions.
It might actually be better for Oscar if he doesn't win this year, because then they could quite say, listen, another year in Formula 2 is not going to hurt you. It's going to be probably a good thing. And then Zhao can disappear with his money, take his money to Alfa Romeo, wherever else he's going with all that cash, and give Oscar another year, once again learning the ropes, learning more about the situation, and getting more sort of test drives and simulator drives for Alpine, and then when Fernando is ready to pull the plug, or when they're ready to pull the plug on him, well, that's not a Renault team, but I mean, even if
they'll farm him out, they'll push for a drive somewhere else.
Well, Esteban Ocon, I mean, he could be sort of on the radar of other teams as well, and you could see that if Sebastian decides to give it away at the end of next year, Esteban Ocon wouldn't be a bad pickup for somebody like Aston Martin. So either way, they've got to find a spot. They've got to find a spot for him, for Oscar, or they're just going to have to let him go to another team.
If he's not there this obviously he's not there next year. There's a big chance of following. I reckon he's got 2-year window to get in, because Mark Webber will be pushing his barrow with a lot of fertilizer and a lot of paper bark in the back of it. And if he's not there in 2 years, he's probably outside. Maybe outside the square then, unfortunately.
The thing is, if he's not there within 2 years, hopefully by that time we might know what Alpine are doing as far as Le Mans and the World Endurance Championship. If they are actually going to build this damn hypercar, and he's got some opportunity there, or they've got somewhere that they can push Fernando off to happily, and he can go back to Le Mans and try and win another Le Mans, but this time for Renault Alpine. The interesting thing is the head of Renault, the CEO of Renault, has today or in the last couple of days come out and said that as far as he's concerned, the company are committed to Formula One for the next 10 years, and that's a really good sign. But what that means whether that means anything for a WRC push is anybody's guess. But the WRC probably doesn't need them at this stage. There's so many factory teams coming in over the next year or so, and rumours of another one to be announced in the next couple of weeks, I believe. So we've got a few in already, but apparently there's another major manufacturer about to put up their hand and come into that scene as well. So there's some opportunities there.
Goodwood was a great bit of catch up. If you've got some spare time in between earthquakes and tremors at the moment, you could. I mentioned to you guys through our group chat that Patton's Dow was down at Phillip Island for the Historics there a couple of years ago, and we had the pleasure. Richard, remember with Patton's in the red Maserati?
Yeah,
Brett,
that's right.
Yeah,
I'd almost forgotten until you reminded me.
Yeah. Patton's had his Maserati. He was one of the guests that was invited to come over by PR a couple of years ago, and I think he was one of our first cap off the ranks. We interviewed him twice, in fact, because Brett and I went to the track on the day before. It might have been the Friday, I think, and he was one of our first interviews that day. But we had some technical issues that day. We didn't have the pleasure of Stuart with us and the equipment, and some. I think we had some audio difficulties, so we redid the interview the following day, didn't we, Richard? And we got some great footage. Richard was on camera, I remember, and yeah, he did quite well. I think he got acquired a 9th place over the Goodwood. So it was some great historic racing.
Did you watch Goodwood? It was
yes, I did.
Marvelous.
Yeah,
it was some sensational racing.
Oh, they just throw
they throw those minis around.
All the junkers they throw around. How do they stay together?
No money spent there.
Well, there's some interesting comments there. There's basically a grey area where if you've got a certain car that's worth multiple millions of dollars and you happen to turn up to a racing event such as Goodwood with an exact replica, you're able to race it rather than racing the one that's worth multiple millions of dollars, but only if you are the owner of the actual one.
And
so they're not afraid of throwing a Ferrari into a corner, because sometimes it's not exactly a Ferrari, but they own the Ferrari.
The dimensions of those wheels.
If you decide that you do want to race a £30 million Ferrari, it's never written off. Even if you wad it into a ball and it requires a £2 million rebuild, it's still going to be worth 30 to 35 million pounds.
So long as you can carefully cut out
it's as original as Grandpa's axe. The chassis plate and this much of the chassis rail is original. Everything else is new. But no, it's got the chassis plate on it.
So as long as that chassis plate is there,
I'm just amazed by obviously some of the dimensions. Like they're old cars, they were raced, back in 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. But the dimensions of the wheels. I mean, we're looking at some of them that are back 13s, 14-inch rims. They're not like the big 18s and 19s and the plus size wheels that they use these days. The only thing they've got going for them is probably the tyre manufacturer and the rubber that they've got on them around the 4 things that are actually holding them onto the tarmac as they're going around in circles is, a handprint. So they must be fairly new tyres. And to see them, they throw them around. I just don't know how they stick together. The mechanicals of it, yeah.
The thing is, they get a lot of...
There are bespoke historic tyres made to support the historic racing community. And you think, as big as we think it is in Australia, in Europe and North America, it is massive. And the events, if you think it's hard to get into an historic racing event in Australia as a competitor, there are a slew. There's an entire calendar of exclusive, invitation-only, curated historic events. Obviously, I think a lot of us would agree that the Goodwood revival is effectively the pinnacle of historic event by nature of not just what happens on track, but the culture and the atmosphere off track in terms of the presentation and the period celebration. But, having spoken with a number of competitors who've competed in historic events overseas, the North Americans and then, the Europeans to another level again.
We went to
Dunlop. Sorry, just before you go, Brett. Dunlop, Michelin, Pirelli, and probably Kuma. I reckon must be rubbing their hands together. The big tire manufacturers.
Yep.
Oh yeah, it's big business. We went to we've been lucky enough to go to a few of the overseas, including particularly in France at both Montpellier and Dijon, and in both cases, I mean some of the transporters and some of the outfits. We spoke at Montpellier with Sid Taylor Racing, and I think they had something like 12 cars in 2 major transporters that they brought along, and each of the cars was worth over $1 million. They were all Lotus. They were all either they were all Formula 1 or Formula 2 cars. We're just sort of having the interview and sort of leaning up against. And he said, "Oh, that car you're leaning up against at the moment, that's Jim Clark's old Formula 2. And that's there's Jackie Stewart's car. There's so and so. And this is the Graham Hill Lotus 49 over there." It was just it was just
left your head spinning on the roll call of who the drivers were of those cars.
And they were just so crazy in terms of the way they pushed these cars. I mean, compared with what you see over here, I mean, they would just take no prisoners. They were just the Formula 1 cars were banging wheels. They were going to Dijon. They were going through side by side through the downhill sweeper. at the back of the track. And we were just there, and they were banging wheels, and they were the Lotus 72s against and old Brabhams. And
in contrast, though, I suppose, even though I said I don't know how they hold together and they throw them around. Back in the day, though, they made the car and they made it to last the whole season with, I suppose, very little mechanical upgrades or any they were made to not just for one race, or they weren't breakable or interchangeable parts and so forth. They didn't change the suspension and they weren't adjustable and stuff like that. They were just rolled off the back of the trailer or rolled off the transporter week in, week out for those events that were over in Europe back in the day. So, and these cars have probably been maintained to a certain extent at their pinnacle. They've been fully restored and they've been built and maintained to race again. So there's probably still at the peak of their powers, but it still just amazes me that these guys go out there with just a open face helmet, maybe some goggles on. It's pouring rain in some of those cases when we were watching the revival last week as well, though, too, and they're just banging it sideways everywhere and probably having an absolute ball.
Taking no prisoners.
Don't forget the Nomex scarf.
Yes.
No, yes. Right on, Stilly.
Mancow Mark is pointing out that Race Week 2 is on Bang Shift video on YouTube at 5:55.
That's Rocky Mountain Race Week 2.0. That's Chad, the guy who does it. And I'll just fast forward a little bit and show you. I'm not going to press play or anything like that, but it's been some very good streams under very trying conditions. And Chad, who does stuff on a budget like us, has to deal with people who have got no idea how hard it is. Does a fairly good job and has actually outshone Motor Trend's coverage last week for the Hot Rod race week. Because frankly, they sucked. Their technical side sucked badly. They had lots of money and lots of cameras, but the uploads were absolute junk.
I was going to send you a link too if you wanted to have a look at some bad streaming. The cricket yesterday from on KO from Adelaide was somebody
hang on. That's what the tracks looks like. We'll just pinch that full screen. I'm not going to press play.
No,
but you can see the sort of environment in the middle of nowhere at an ex-military airport that the runways have been converted to a drag track. So that's how wide open it is, and getting signal out of there must be a challenge.
I can see Holly down there and a few other sponsors, so he's got some support, which is great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. Going back to
I'm just going to press a button and go. Yep. Hey, look, here we are.
Just something on the pools popped up there. Even ABC's got into the Dan and Oscar show. There's a link there to something that they've done. Yep. It's interesting. ABC in the last couple of weeks seem to have rediscovered motor racing. I mean, you saw nothing about motorsport at all on the ABC for years and years. It just did not exist. It didn't seem to matter, who won what or did. But in the last, because not only have we had stuff about Dan and Oscar Piastri but we've had other, Remy Gardner. There's been stories about him.
Remember the last year they did that 5 series special on Brock and Gardner and all the other ones. So they did probably the last 12, 18 months they've given it a crack.
I think also somebody put up on Facebook there's a young woman there who's one of their chief sports reporters, and because of the lockdown situation, she's been doing her reports, her sports reports.
Louise Ransom it is, because I told her
she used to be on 64, isn't it?
She used to be on Fox for years, and she made a transition to ABC about 2 years ago. So when Paul Knight stopped doing sports reports for the morning stuff on ABC, news thing. Louise and a couple others have all filled the gap, and she's been the main sort of one on the desk, and so they've all been doing a lot. But she, as the guys said, if you look, I picked up on it earlier than what these guys did. I don't know why they're screenshots, but that she has, Jack Brabham models, cars, and stuff like that sort of stuff. So, she's been a massive sports fan across the whole board and been on many coverages for years and years and years. People are only actually just starting to realise actually she has great knowledge.
Yeah, I don't know whether she's got anything to do with the sudden discovery of the sport again by the ABC. Because of course, back in the day, the ABC was a major supporter and major televiser of sport. All the Australian Grands Prix back in the days pre-Formula One were all televised on the ABC. Back in the Formula 5000 days, going back into the 70s, the Tasman Series was a regular feature.
I can remember
Sandown 500, Pete.
500, yes. Yeah, I can remember a couple of Sandown 500s on the ABC.
Georgie Tunney also has a hand in it too. She's done some great stuff as far as a little bit of touch on motorsport. That's Millsy's fiance. She does the weather a bit, and she does a bit of the motorsport, and does she's really good as well. Georgie and Louise are absolutely great girls in the ABC. They've got some interest in motorsport these days and have done for a long time.
Well, that's good to see. I mean, it's good to see that we're getting some a bit of coverage for a change. Because I mean, yes, now we know football's popular and cricket and all the rest of it. They're all very popular, but motorsport does have a very strong following, and it's good to see, especially when you've got international young Australians in particular sort of doing well on the world stage. And as I said, if you're just tuning in late, one that we're keeping our fingers crossed for, Cooper Murray, who will be our guest on the program next week on In Pit Lane. So be watching that Thursday night at 9 o'clock on C31 Melbourne.
Thank you, Virtual R, for the Tasman series. Yeah, look, I think there's an opportunity for for Channel 10, for SBS, for that Speed Week they do a bit. They've been always catching up with the Australian superbikes and stuff like that around Australia. But there's a real opportunity when things open up again, whether it be drags that we do a lot of out there, out the road at Calder, and all the other events around. That some of the minor mainstream news services and TV outlets can get back on board and put some interest back in the countryside when events open up again. But
anyway, as Stuart and I would be able to tell you, in terms of the people are desperate for content at the moment, and the technology is there to actually do these things. Yeah, and I mean we've actually got that technology, and we can do it for you. But we've got to have cars back on because they just keep. Stuart is now pointing a very expensive camera.
It's not the size of the camera; it's the operator.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I've used that before.
Yeah, shouldn't handle large tools. Oh, he has two cameras. There we go. He's going to point.
It's so big. It's so big. It takes two hands to handle.
It does. So that's a proper camera.
Speaking of two hands and handling and stuff like that, did anyone catch up with San Marino on the weekend?
Yes. MotoGP, another great race, and and another win to Bagnaia, who is now in the habit. As Jackie Stewart used to say, the hardest win you'll ever have is your first one. Once you've had that, everyone after that becomes a little bit easier. Well, he certainly
proved the daily double.
He came through and he won, and he held out. He held out the competition to the very end. It was another.
Now, on that, no one has said this, and I'm going to. Obviously, we're on YouTube tonight, and I have not heard one commentator, one expert, one critic. No one has said this yet. Everyone's giving Pecco Bagnaia some great accolades and congratulations and kudos. And look, he deserves 110% that. But I'm going to take it to another level because this has not even been mentioned on mainstream coverage. I don't know why it hasn't been picked up on. So. He is Italian, of course, like Valentino Rossi, and it's also, it's been thrown out there. I mean, he's come through the VR 46 ranks and elevated up through the academy, etc., like that, along with a couple of other animals. Same with Bastianini. So before I get into the main thing, congratulations, Bastianini.
Yeah.
On the satellite team for Ducati, which is a blue bike, which is very unusual to see Ducati in blue, but it is the Avinta satellite team, managed to become a third. And there's been some huge, massive talk around the paddock and around MotoGP full stop on his talent, and he's finally got to show it on the weekend. However, going back to Bagnaia, if you look at the last two races, okay, yes, he did come first, but more importantly, the last two races, who has he beaten? He has beaten a 7 times world champion in the last 10 years of Marc Marquez. He held out seven passing maneuvers in the last couple of laps, and he outshone him as well too on the better rider on the day, because you're at the peaky levels. Last week he held out probably what is going to be the MotoGP champion as well of this particular season of 2021, Fabio Quartararo, and he challenged him and put the pressure on for the guy who'd never won a race until last week, and he's won his second in a row, and to be under that immense pressure by two of the fastest riders that are going around ever and will do again in the future. I reckon he's this, no one's even given him the credit where it's credit due to take on those two guys and have those on your tail. And you'd be going past the pit board every single lap going plus 0.0. In other words, he has got the blowtorch on your tailpipe. So I reckon congratulations to him and well done. Just a little bit about our boy Jack Miller. He faded a little bit more this week. It was a double Italian Grand Prix again, so it's the second week in a row that the MotoGP has been in Italy, and it was Marco Simoncelli, rest in peace as well too, a man who tragically we lost a few years ago as well with an Edwards and Rossi unfortunate clipping. But so yeah, Jack faded a bit. I don't know, he looked a little bit forlorn. They took a shot of him in the pits just after when he was hydrating again. So he came fifth after a track limits eradication by Joan Mir. And I know that's Stuart's favourite subject about exceeding track limits. So we won't go too much in that. But so he got penalised for it and got dropped back from fifth to sixth. So look, the three of them were all crossing the line within a couple of hundredths of a second of each other, but he just didn't hang on. He's got to find a way to just push that bike and find the best out of it. And that's probably been his biggest struggle all season, is finding the tyre life at the end of the race and making it to the line as best a lap time as he possibly can, and making it work for him. I don't know whether he's scrubbing it too hard at the start or pushing it too hard, but he's got to find more length.
Yeah, I think that's been the problem. I mean, he's been very quick, pretty good in most qualifying. He was certainly quicker in last weekend in qualifying. But as you say, as the race went on, and he said afterwards he had a really bad vibration, which he believes was a tyre-related issue. And it just seems that he makes a really good start, and then slowly but surely falls back into the pack and goes backwards. So he's just got to find a way of getting more consistency. It's interesting that in the MotoGP tests that are happening at the moment, Bagnaia has also been the quickest today or yesterday on in that test as well. Remy Gardner had his first taste of the MotoGP power, and also had his first crash as well. But he wasn't. He and his
teammate both jumped on the KTM. So Fernandez and himself, the two, 1-2 in the Moto2 series, are both linked to KTM and Red Bull, and both have had their first taste of MotoGP. So good luck to both of them, actually.
Yeah, so they have. So next year in MotoGP, we'll have two Australians involved in that in MotoGP, and hopefully next year we'll see the circus back down here at Phillip Island. So that will be worth. That'll bring a big crowd in if you've got both
fingers crossed. Fingers crossed Valentino Rossi comes down just for a trip for a holiday or just some PR as well too.
Well, he's already said that he wouldn't rule out completely doing the occasional wild card if Vanessa. And like I said last week, it wouldn't surprise me if that would be a track, because he loves Phillip Island, and I think that it wouldn't surprise me at all that if he had the opportunity, if the Australian Grand Prix Corporation, put up their hand and said, Valley, what about saying goodbye to your Australian fans? If he can do it, depending on what his commitments are with his own team and also with some of his four-wheel stuff that he's doing,
and with the wife and bub as well too next year too. Now remember,
but it wouldn't surprise me if he did sort of jump on and at least and put in an appearance of some sort down at Phillip Island, and perhaps race again. But but it would be great to see him because he was hugely popular down there, and he said on many occasions how much he loves that circuit. So
well, he can come over. I'm sure Jeremy Burgess will find a room for him at somewhere around Melbourne, and Jeremy would be happy to have him down here.
And if Jeremy won't, Valley, I will. We'll make a pitch a tent out the back.
Well,
out the back for you, mate.
Philly's got some room in over in the Hawthorn land over in Glen Waverley or thereabouts. So I can't remember.
I can just imagine Valentino it being chauffeur driven. I must say, this how you say gets very fast car. You drive very nice, Brett.
I think it'd be more Mr.
But for me,
Stilly,
maybe a 1.4 liter, maybe too big.
It'd be more Mr. Stilly. We go for pony ride down Chapel Street.
I didn't know that. I didn't know Valentino Rossi was a caricature Chinese gentleman. But anyway, there you go.
Hey, send him out to Bullen. He won't know where that is.
By the way, Bullen is awfully close to the epicenter.
It was very close.
It was very close.
Lacola was the closest, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm less than 100k away from it as crow flies, and it's certainly that
just a small point.
You should have heard what he said.
Just a small point there, Richard.
The place started shaking.
The crow was doing a Graham Kennedy impersonation.
But just a small point on crows. We actually don't have any in Australia. We have ravens.
We have ravens. Yes, yes, we know. Yes.
Yeah, no, we're
two different breeds.
Pretty raven.
And they're
Don't
smart.
you mean? Do you think that maybe we used to have crows, but then the raven said nevermore?
Oh, there you go.
It's not a bad for a beginner try. Not a bad for a beginner try.
And I think on that point we're just about at the end of our.
That was a very poetic moment to end the show.
A very poetic.
And I can't even do any weekend of Bernie's bloody jokes this week because there's no Richie here. Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, and as we say, we will go now and quote Dave Stillwell nevermore, and we will see you next week on the on Full Course Yellow straight after In Pit Lane on Channel 31 Melbourne.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Remember, if you're out there and you've got friends who might like to join the conversation, come on board, and that includes on the camera as well. You don't have to just be behind the camera. We can have a word with us. We can let you in on the panel as well too. There is Rivi. Look at Dave. Yeah, Dave.
You can try and outdo Dave's messy hair look for the week. He's beat me.
I was going to say, could we issue our consolation and the commiserations to the Victorian motorsport officials, particularly those from the Victorian Mini Club who were planning to run the 5th round of the Victorian State Circuit Racing Championship this weekend. Of course, rounds 4 and 5 have now been abandoned and the championships have all been declared where possible after the 3 rounds have been conducted earlier in the year. So we're all looking forward to Phillip Island at the end of November.
As they say, with this year, if you had some sort of round early in the year, go hard or go home because that's where you'll end up. You won't be going anywhere else.
Be going to a racetrack. Yeah,
go hard.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens. So, as we said last week, so it's still the plan by the Victorian Historic Racing Register to run Sandown in November, and there is a chance, providing all of the vaccination rates are hit on time, there is some chance that will go ahead because it's an outdoor event. So there is a chance for that happening. And if that goes ahead, also Isle of Magic would be going ahead as well. And some of those categories that haven't had the full complement of and had their championships declared in the state series will pick up points, including the XLs in Richard series. They'll pick up points at Isle of Magic.
And just an inside info, go out there and get a jab or two because you know what, you may not be included to be able to go to an event, let alone race or anything like that, unless you have proof of vaccination. So. Or go and get the jab because you know what, the way it's going through Australia right now, you will not be admitted to any particular place unless you have it. So just a friendly community service announcement for out there. Go and grab it.
Written Spoken North Wales Club there to go on behalf of the Australian Vaccination Party.
Exactly. And Craig Kelly has nothing to do with me. This is not I'm sick of getting those.
No, we can tell you got nothing to do with Craig Kelly because you don't have to read. Because you don't have to read the political announcement off the card next to the camera.
let's close it off there. And guys, thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next week on Full Course Yellow, and of course in Pit Lane on Channel 31, 9 o'clock next Thursday, and then of course straight after flick over to Full Course Yellow. We'll have all the news from Sochi and anything else that's happened on the weekend across the world of motorsport. See you next week.
Stuart might even sing his hairbrush. Stuart might even sing into his hairbrush next week.
He might do that too. So we'll see you next week.
And it's time to break because I want to swear.
Okay, Stuart is now going to swear.